The Rolling Stone article, too. We're going to get into this stuff in great detail as the program unfolds. But the Rolling Stone, they had the study, the investigation, if you will, commissioned by the dean of the Columbia University School of Journalism. I probably overdo this analogy, but this is probably like asking Colonel Sanders to investigate a sudden rash of chicken killings. It's just uncanny to me what a closed world that these people live in. So here you have an entirely made-up story from beginning to end, and it's blamed it's blamed on the person that doesn't exist, who told a story that was so good. She was such a great liar. She was so persuasive. She was so emotive. She was so classically good that she fooled everybody. She fooled the info babe. She fooled the reporterette. She fooled the editors. She fooled the owner. She fooled everybody. And nobody is going to get fired. Not a soul is going to get fired. Even though Rolling Stone has had to admit to everything, and the reporterette, the info babe, Surdley, whatever her name is, she had this great apology and this great mea culpa, and there's one group to whom she did not apologize. Do you know who that is? The frat boys, the people who were accused of all this, did not get an apology. The fraternity did not get an apology. Everybody else got an apology, including the liar. Now, I'll tell you what this illustrates. It illustrates two things, and you know them as you're students of this program. You know this well. There are two things at work here, because you know that when the story was exposed as a fraudulent story, the InfoBabe reporterette immediately reacted by saying, well, okay, but it still happens. It still happens. It may not have happened in this case, but I still succeeded in raising your consciousness level about it, because you know that we have a rape crisis on campus in this country. It may not have happened here. It may not have, but it's happening, and I have alerted you to it. Therefore, it's okay. So what we have here, we have two glaring truths that I, L. Rushbo, have pointed out for years. And that is, where liberalism is concerned, the nature of the evidence is irrelevant. It is the seriousness of the charge that matters. And in this case, we have an allegation, a charge, an accusation that a bunch of frat boys wantonly raped and maimed and did whatever else, to now an imaginary woman who was so good at lying she fooled the world. Okay, that's a serious charge. The fact that there's no evidence is irrelevant, because the seriousness of the charge warrants the story being written. The second characteristic of this, the second teachable moment is, just as I have always said, when examining liberal programs, legislative programs, any program, social program, you name it, war on poverty, take your pick. Every one of them, abject failure. But you're not supposed to point that out. We are never to look at the results. We are only supposed to examine and judge and be impressed by the good intentions. So in the Rolling Stone rape story, we have it all. We have the seriousness of the charge trumping the need for facts, for evidence. There's no need, because the seriousness of the charge was elevated to conscious level all over the country. And the good intentions of everybody involved, from the InfoBabe reporterette to the editors to the publisher to the owner, they all were trying to save and protect women from frat boy Republicans who are raping them and accosting them and attacking them all over America, in campus after campus. And that intention is honorable. So whether the fact that this story was made up, and you ought to read this investigation report from the dean at the University of Columbia, or Columbia University Journalism School. He points out that the reporterette was so devoted to her cause. She was so dedicated and loyal to her cause, to her premise, that it was so powerful, it forced her to overlook the fact that none of it happened. And therefore we should understand, because this is a good reporterette. This is a good woman, because she cares, and she's aware, and she's impassioned, and she's just on point. She is devoted to this issue. Never mattered that this didn't happen. The fact that she cares so much, the fact that she's devoted, the fact that she is just totally focused on this is the reason why the fact that didn't happen escaped her. This is corruption, this journalistic malpractice. I don't care what you want to call it. And everybody involved on the left is doing what they always do. They're circling the wagons, just like they did for Dan Blather, just like they tried to do for Brian Williams, but it was really tough to do there. But they're not through trying to resuscitate Brian Williams. That's going to happen. Well, looks like the University of Virginia fraternity Phi Kappa Psi is going to try to Alpha Cow Omega Rolling Stone. They're going to sue him. They're going to sue him for this rape story, which everybody involved has admitted was totally made up. And yet, the Columbia University Journalism School attempted to justify it, partially. On loan from God. You have to say, God. Like talent on loan from God. It doesn't quite. The majesty. Rush Limbaugh in Florida on the EIB network at 800-282-2882. Okay, the Rolling Stone story. We've known for a while that the whole story was made up. We've known that it was fake. We've known why. We know that the left wants to create an image of rape that is constant, frightening, never-ending, and omnipresent on American campuses. So they created out of whole cloth a story of imaginary rape at the University of Virginia involving a fraternity, Phi Kappa Psi. Thing is that it didn't happen. The woman who claimed to be the victim, Jackie, had made it all up. When this was exposed as true weeks ago now, the reaction from the left, they circle the wagons around Rolling Stone, they circle the wagons around the owner and the publisher, Jan Wenner, they circle the wagons around the InfoBabe reporter, and they made the point, it doesn't matter if it was wrong, because we know what happens. And even if it didn't happen in this case, we know it does happen, and therefore our story is very worthwhile, because we are raising consciousness levels, which is very important. Women going to college in America need to be aware they could be raped at any moment by a frat boy if they go to a mixer, if they go to any kind of a frat house party, they should be aware. So we've done good work here. But it wasn't true. It didn't happen. This story encapsulates two very important beliefs that the left has to justify everything they do and to justify their failures. And we see it time and time and time and time again. The first principle or premise is that the nature of the evidence is irrelevant in any allegation. Instead, what is important is the seriousness of the charge. This was the justification for pursuing Clarence Thomas when Anita Hill blurted out that he had sexually harassed her. There was no evidence. It had supposedly happened long ago. There were just character witnesses on both sides of the hearings. But there was never any evidence. But the left said that doesn't matter, the seriousness of the charge warrants that we look into this. The first time that it was used in a prominent way that I recall, and it may have happened before this, a guy who's still a professor is an Iran expert at Columbia University. His name is Gary Sick. And he wrote a book some years after the Iranian hostage crisis, which was in 1979. And he alleged that there was a deal between the Reagan administration and the Iranian, well, the Reagan campaign during 1980 and the Iranian government to make sure the hostages were not released before the election so as not to help the incumbent Democrat, Jimmy Carter. Made this allegation and put it in a book. A book, supposedly with all kinds of support documentation, all kinds of evidence. Tom Foley was the Speaker of the House at the time. This was when George H.W. Bush was president. So we're talking sometime between 1988 and 1992. Remember Tom Foley, the Democrat Speaker of the House, going on TV and saying there's no evidence yet for this, but the seriousness of the charge demands that we investigate this. There was nothing to it ever, and everybody knew it. All it was the Democrats concocting a scheme to impugn and attack Bush 41 while in office. In fact, this might have been during the campaign of 1988. That I'm not sure on. But it was either to make sure he didn't get elected or make sure he didn't get reelected. It was one of the two. And there were even allegations that there were midnight flights, Reagan campaign officials to Paris to meet with the Iranians to secure the deal. None of it was true, but it was all justified. And the investigation into it was justified. And it took months, by the way. The idea that the Reagan campaign had arranged with the Iranians to keep the hostages hostage till after the 1980 election. That story was, the investigation of that in the 90s went on and on and on. So again, we had seriousness of the charge being all that mattered. Nature of the evidence, irrelevant. There have been other classic illustrations of this, but this has reared its head in the Rolling Stone case. The second premise that the Democrats operate under, second principle, is that never are we to examine the substance of their ideas or their programs, the results of their programs. Take any leftist program like the war on poverty. I don't care what it is, name it. We are never, ever supposed to examine the results because they fail, and that's why we're never supposed to look at it. Instead, we are to judge their intentions, where we will find they have the greatest hearts in the world. My God, they've got the biggest hearts. They care. They love people. They have all this compassion. They're only trying to help. At least they're trying to do something. And that excuses every failure involved. Those two principles are front and center throughout this Rolling Stone story on imaginary rape at the University of Virginia. Jan Wenner, who is the publisher, the owner, editor, I don't know what he does, Rolling Stone, said that the problems with the article started with its source. He described the source as a really expert, fabulous storyteller who managed to manipulate the magazine's journalism process. What an admission. The liar was so good. Such a really expert, fabulous. This liar was so persuasive and so charismatic. She fooled everybody. She fooled our brilliant reporter. She fooled our brilliant editors. She fooled our photographers. She fooled everybody. Everybody. Our entire journalistic process was manipulated and corrupted. What the hell could your process have been worth if that's the case? Isn't that the whole point? The journalistic process didn't even exist here. The journalistic process that he describes ceased to exist long ago. Journalism today is nothing more than a Democrat Party agenda being advanced under false premise. That's why the story happened, because it advanced the Democrat Party agenda. It advanced the likelihood the Democrats will win the White House again in 2016. It advanced the agenda that the Republicans end up supporting and taking money from people that don't like women. That's why the story ran. That's why the liar was believed, because a blatant case of prejudice and premonition presented itself. The people at Rolling Stone, without being told and without having any evidence, believe that women are being raped on campus every day. Or they want us to think they do. So here comes a fake fabulous telling a story where it happened to her. Bingo! We've got a potential Pulitzer here. The Duke lacrosse case is the exact same thing. Lacrosse player? Well, who are they? Well, they are rich kids, the sons of rich East Coast white people. And they did what all of these young kids do. They have endless money to buy booze and who knows what else. And they preyed on a poor black single mother who was reduced because of the inequities of this horrible country to earn money the only way she could, which was basically to prostitute herself out as a dancer at scummy little lacrosse team parties. And they believed everything that she said happened. The faculty, almost 80% of the faculty signed a letter. None of it happened. Every bit of it was thrown out. But everybody on the left believed it because it fit the imaginary world they have constructed where they live. All of this discrimination and all of this mean-spiritedness, all of this extremism, all this racism and bigotry, my God, they're surrounded by it. It's everywhere. And all somebody has to do is look like a good victim, come up with a story, and they automatically believe it. Seriousness of the charge trumps nature of the evidence every time. So Rolling Stone gets caught. Let's blame the liar. The liar was so good, we got fooled. A really clever liar caught everybody by surprise. I see the Rolling Stone is so used to dealing with honest people like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, all these leftist politicians that they love and adore. Hillary Clinton, yeah, those people tell them the truth all the time. They're so used to dealing with all of these paragons of honesty on the Democrat Party that they naturally believed another one. This one just happened to be a victim. They're so used to people on the left telling them the truth that they couldn't even conceive that the woman was making it up. There was no journalism process because there are no journalists at Rolling Stone, and there is no journalism process there. Just like the Memories Pizza situation, a reporter went hunting for a story that fit a narrative and desire she already concocted. The process of journalism today is nothing more than the attempt to prove the liberal Democrat worldview and agenda. That's all journalism is. It isn't news. It isn't reporting. It isn't telling people what they don't know anymore. It isn't standing on the corner, watch what happens, and then tell people who want there. That's not what journalism is. Journalism, the journalism process, as Jan Winter says, is the attempt to prove the liberal Democrat agenda. And look how Rolling Stone defends itself. They had any number of ways they could go here. The source was a really expert, fabulous storyteller. You mean like Hillary and dodging sniper fire? You mean like Hillary and Barack Obama and Benghazi? mean like Hillary and the stories of her email and the servers? Really? Well, Hillary was so darn good at storytelling, she manipulated the media's journalism process too. That's how easy this can be spotted. Because everybody that Rolling Stone covers to one degree or another is corrupting the journalism process, because the journalism process is nothing more than the attempt to establish and prove as reality the Democrat Party and liberal agenda. The journalistic process is to elect Democrats and destroy Republicans. That's all that happened here. The process is to be a one-party country that has no constitution and destroy anybody who gets in the way of that dream. That's the modern-day journalistic process. The Columbia Journalism School review and investigation report on this thing is just priceless. As they chronicle every mistake that was made and then explain it and justify it. And the bottom line is nobody involved in this whole story is getting fired. Nobody is getting fired. Why? Because they had the best of intentions. And the intentions, their heart in the right place, big hearts, lots of compassion, trying to help people, that trumps the result. The result, an embarrassing lie. Probably one of the most sordid examples of absolutely horrible journalism in the modern era. Nobody gets canned. Nobody even gets reprimanded because their intentions, they were trying to do the right thing. And in fact, they almost got it right. We know that rape is happening everywhere. We know it just didn't happen here. Damn it, it's one thing they got wrong. But everything else about this story was right. Men are pigs. Women are at risk. There is a war on women. Young men are natural-born predators, and women aren't safe. And everybody knows it, and our story made that aware and obvious to everybody. Your story didn't happen. It may not there, but we know it happens. Don't doubt us. Their intentions were honorable. And their hearts were in the right place. So now the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity said that it's moving forward with a possible lawsuit against Rolling Stone in the wake of this. After 130 days of living under a cloud of suspicion as a result of reckless reporting by Rolling Stone magazine, today the Virginia Alpha Chapter Phi Kappa Psi announced plans to pursue all available legal actions against the magazines, the fraternity said in a statement. The Washington Post, not too long ago, warned the fraternity not to do this. The Washington Post, looking out for their journalistic brethren at Rolling Stone, warned the frat guys, if you do this, you are likely going to raise the lid on all of the nefarious activity going on in your frat house. You may be uncovering a lot of seedy activity going on in there that you may not want anybody to know about. So you'd better really think twice about suing our friends over at Rolling Stone. But I guess the frat boys and their legal counsel decided, to heck with it. Seriously thinking about it. Yeah, the Washington Post says, you frat boys, you better look out. Some of you are underage and you drink and you may have been involved in some unfortunate sexual ventures, and a lawsuit would bring it all out and we would find out you are exactly what the Rolling Stone story alleged. So you better think twice about doing